Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee being held on the 15th of June 2022. This meeting is being webcast with the exception of any business that the Council resolves to exclude the press and public because of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972. Present in the room for this meeting, which is being conducted on a hybrid basis, councillors Alan James, Wyn Mullen-James, Peter Scott, Terry Mendes, James Elson, Gwyneth Ellis, Delith Jones, Andrea Tomlin, Mark Young, Karen Edwards, Mervyn Parry and Hugh Hilditch Roberts, and members of the committee who are attending remotely are councillors Prendergast, Gareth Sandilands, John Harland, Brian Blakely, Julie Matthews and Elved Williams. Don't think there's anybody else who's joined since that list was compiled. The first thing I have to do is ask if there are any apologies. No. The next item on the agenda is declaration of interests. Members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of any business to be conducted at today's meeting. Such interest should be declared now or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it is a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the chamber for the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate and any vote. If a personal and prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available either from committee support staff here in hard copy or online for those attending remotely. Any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item number 3, which is the appointment of Chair of the Planning Committee for the 2022-23 municipal year. Do we have any nominations for the role of Chair? Sorry, Councillor Ellis.
Swn i'n licio cynnig Mark Young, cynghorydd Mark Young fel cadeirydd. Dwi'n meddwl bod pawb yn gwybod bod Mark wedi bod yn aelod arweiniol hefo cyfrifoldeb dros gynllunio. Mae wedi creulio grŵp cyngor yn berson efo darn annibynnol sy'n gallu cydweithio hefo pawb o unrhyw blaid. A dwi'n meddwl bod ystod yn cadeirydd da i'r pwyllgor yma, felly fe hoffwn i gynnig enw cynghorydd Mark Young.
Diolch. Os gynnon ni eilydd?
Diolch. Swn i'n licio eilio cynghorydd Mark Young hefyd. Mae o trwy profiad o cyngor o blaen, mae wedi bod yn cadeirydd da, profiad efo cynllunio gyda fo, a dwi'n meddwl fydd o'n cadeirydd da iawn i'r swydd yma.
Are there any other nominations?
Gary, I've had my hand up for quite a while.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Prendergast. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Can I go ahead, Gary?
Yes, yes, please.
Oh, thank you. I would like to nominate Councillor Alan James for Chair of Planning. Alan has an extensive knowledge of Planning Committee and its protocols. Alan was Vice Chair for 4 years on the Planning Committee in the last Council, only stepping down due to becoming Chair of DCC. During the last 4 years, Alan worked closely with the Chair of Planning and on many occasions chaired planning and attended many site meetings, advising both planning committee members as well as non-committee members. His extensive experience in planning matters and chairing planning meetings began with RHYL Town Council when he was chair for 4 years, standing down when he became a county councillor. Alan has gained experience in chairing within Denbighshire County Council, chairing Democratic Services Committee, Alan has also taken an active role in the previous council, sitting on the strategic planning group, working on the local development plan, and also representing the RHYL member area group to further develop the plan. He is involved with county active travel, working with officers and sustrands, fellow councillors and residents to promote the green agenda. With his experience and his knowledge with the council workings, I therefore nominate Councillor Alan James for Chair of DCC Planning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? I see Councillor Brian Blakely's hand is raised. Go ahead, Councillor Blakely.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, I'd like to second Councillor Alan James to be the Chair of Planning for this coming year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Blakely. Are there any other nominations? Okay, there being no other nominations, we've got 2 candidates for the role of chair. So the committee will need to proceed to take a vote in respect of that. What I propose to do is to do a roll call vote, if that's okay with members. Yeah. Okay.
We're having a lot of interference on
the translation.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, whilst we're doing that, I'll speak in English in respect of the vote, so we can do the vote. So can I just ask, I'll read out each member of the committee's name and I'll ask you to indicate the candidate that you wish to support in respect of the chair. So it's in alphabetical order. Councillor Brian Blakely. You're on mute, Councillor Blakely.
Sorry about that, Chair. Yeah, my nomination is for Alan James.
Councillor Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones is not present. Councillor Karen Edwards. Councillor Gwyneth Ellis.
Dwi'n pleidleisio dros cynghorydd Matt Young.
Councillor James Elson. Councillor Chris Evans, don't think is present. John Harland.
Alan James.
Councillor Hilditch Roberts.
Councillor Young.
Councillor Alan James. Councillor Delith Jones.
y cynghorydd Mark Young.
Councillor Julie Matthews.
Councillor Alan James.
Councillor Terry Mendes.
Councillor Mark Young.
Councillor Raj Metri, I don't think is present. Councillor Winmullen James.
Alan James.
Councillor Mervyn Parry. Councillor Peter Prendergast.
Alan James.
Councillor Gareth Sandilands.
Alan James.
Scott.
Councillor Mark Young.
Councillor Andrea Tomlin.
Councillor Mark Young.
Councillor Elford Williams.
Cynghorydd Mark Young.
Councillor Mark Young.
Can I just raise something? We've substituted Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones with Ellie Chard. I don't know whether Ellie's on or...
No, she hasn't.
You called out Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones.
That's the list I've got.
Oh, right, okay.
That's the list I've got. If Councillor Ellie Chard, I don't have her down as a formal substitution. Okay. The result of the vote is that the votes cast in favour of Councillor Alan James were 7. The votes cast in favour of Mark Young were 10, with 1 abstention. So Councillor Mark Young is elected as chair of the committee.
Okay, thank you, members, and thanks for the support. And whoever won it today, you're in good hands. I can say that safely. So, Jock and Vow. I'll move on to item 4, which is appointment of vice chair, please. And any nominations, please.
I'd like to nominate Peter Scott for vice chair. I'll keep it brief. He's a very, very experienced councillor. He was former chair of DCC, and he's had many, many years experience on the planning committee.
Any seconders, please?
I would like to second Peter Scott for vice chair. He is obviously experienced, and I think he'll do a cracking job. Thank you.
Any other nominations, please?
Thank you very much. I'd like to nominate Alan James.
And do we have a seconder, please?
I second Alan James, thank you.
Any others? Any other nominations? Okay. And I'll hand over to Gary for the roll call, please, for the vote.
Okay, members, same again. I'll just read out your names. If you could just tell me the candidate for vice chair that you wish to cast your vote for, please. So, Councillor Brian Blakely.
Alan James.
Councillor Karen Edwards. Cynghorydd Gwyneth Ellis.
Ymatol.
Councillor James Elson. Councillor Crichton's not here. Councillor John Harland.
Alan James.
Cynghorydd Hugh Hilders Roberts.
Peter Scott.
Councillor Alan James. Cynghorydd Delith Jones.
Peter Scott.
Councillor Julie Matthews.
Alan James.
Councillor Terry Mendes. Peter Scott. Councillor Mettry's not here. Councillor Winmullen James.
Alan James.
Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry. Councillor Prendergast.
Alan James.
Councillor Gareth Sandilands.
Councillor Alan James.
Councillor Peter Scott. Councillor Andrea Tomlin. Cynghorydd Elfed Williams.
Cynghorydd Alan James.
Councillor Mark Young.
Councillor Peter Scott.
Chair, the result of the vote is that there were 8 votes cast for Councillor Alan James, 9 votes cast for Councillor Peter Scott, and 1 abstention, which means that Councillor Peter Scott is elected as Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you all then for voting. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I will now move on to item 6, which are the minutes, which I'm going to assume you've all read, and I will go through first of all for accuracy. So I go from page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Okay, we all happy with that?
I propose the correct, Chair.
Okay, and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Paddy. Any matters about yeah.
Well, correct record first.
Okay.
So we've got to move in a second. Just
Okay.
show of hands.
Okay, show of hands, please. Okay, that's carried, and now I'll just go through the minutes again for any matters arising. So page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Any matters arising from those minutes? Councillor Paddy.
Yes, Chair. Can I just bring in the last planning committee meeting, and I'm just looking for it there, but I can't see it. Sorry, I was just flicking through it quickly. On the page 11. No, it's not. Sorry, it's not page 11. I brought up in the last meeting something that we wanted to take forward for the trunk road agencies with their decisions on planning applications. That when an application comes to trunk road agencies, they just look at it and put it on file and put it until they can actually have time to respond to it, which holds a lot of applications up. And I think that we were going to bring it up in this planning committee to write to trunk road agencies to, because what happens is that an application comes in, it goes to them like it does to everybody else, and there's a time scale for them to respond to it. They send a draft reply in saying that they will respond when they've got time to, which could hold the applicant's application up for 6 or 9 months. I believe that they only have one officer working on this for the whole of Mid and North Wales. And it's quite an issue, especially if it's somebody's business that's waiting for an application to be made. So anyway, I think you've got the gist of where I'm going from the last time I put it forward. So if you could respond to that one, and maybe we could push them to make, my proposal would be for them to abide by the timelines given by everybody else and not hold applications up. If they can't respond, we ignore their comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that. I think we agreed to write once a new plan committee was in place. So thank you for that. And I'll hand over to Officer Paul Griffin now.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome aboard. Thank you, Parry. Yes, I've got those notes in from the previous thing. I'll probably liaise with yourself directly on the sort of the tone of that letter and the direction of it. I mean, the reality is that they're bound by legislation to respond within a certain time, and that can actually include a sort of a holding direction if they want. But I think it's important we do try and stress to them that their responses are actually holding up applications at this point. So I'm happy to liaise with you outside of this committee on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone else, or are we all happy when I move on? Okay, I will move on now to item 7, which is applications, and we're going to page 21, code 10210091 PS, and the location is Landen Barnat, DEIO, UCHAF, BRYNEGLWYS, CORWEN. The proposed variation of condition number 2 for planning permission code 10/2019-0443 to allow minor material amendments to approved scheme. The local member is Councillor Hugh Evans. Officer recommendation is to grant, and we do have a public speaker, Mr. Craig Dolan. Come up, please. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of our retrospective plan application for DEIO. Full planning has previously been approved for change of use to rural enterprise development, which included the construction operation of an equine physiotherapist and rehabilitation centre. A change of layout to our stable block had to be undertaken from a health and safety perspective for staff and horses, with the approved plans being for an upside down new stable block as described in the committee documentation. It was identified whilst under construction that this would not work due to the slope of the land, so a reverse L shape was erected, and this stable is the exact same size and square footage as the pre-approved plan application. Effectively, we had to move 2 stables back through 90 degrees. A gated entrance was added to the retrospective plan application due to our decision from a safety and security point of view to bring the approved gated entrance backwards into our own land by 10 feet to enable a greater turning circle and ease for horse boxes arriving and departing the site. The Highways Department had no issue with the original plan to have the entrance running parallel to the existing hedge line, and so by setting the gate backs even further into our own land, this has given added ease of use and assists with site security, in that our gate base remains very close to ground level, particularly important for having expensive horses on site and growing crime against equine facilities. The gates open outwards due to the slope of the site entrance, but through our design, even when fully opened, the gates sit behind the existing hedge line and therefore have no impact on displays or visibility for drivers entering or leaving our site. All the attending horse boxes are pre-booked and have an arrival time. We ensure the gates are open for when they arrive to enable a smooth transition from the road onto site. The original gate entrance design stipulated by the planning department was on a strict basis that only tall, solid gates are to be erected and the internal facility was not to be seen from the road. We have adhered to this, and we have also been with all of the stipulations, including planting scheme to soften the site. Both Mr. Adam Turner and Mr. Paul Griffin from Denbighshire Planning Department have been fully supportive of our approved plan applications and this retrospective plan application, with both having complimented us on our work on site and transparency to date. I supplied yesterday to the committee documentation showing 3 existing business entrances, all within the OMB and all within 1.7 miles of our business for comparison due to local complainants against our facility. Regarding the comments on the lighting, our site is not overlooked by any properties, and all our lighting has been previously approved and is only on when required, all with low voltage LED and minimal comparison to some local houses with high powered security lighting and the local businesses mentioned, including a local farm which has high level flood lighting on often out until the early hours, especially during the winter months. Unfortunately, a serial planning complainant has targeted ourselves, our project and our business, which has contributed to this case coming to your committee. However, we have been transparent throughout. This individual has appeared named on both our original and second applications as an objector, and both were approved despite her complaints to the plan department. A false statement letter removed from the department after submission of statements of fact, and this individual even turning up and videoing our contractors also on site, resulting in police involvement. So we clearly have been targeted. We hope very much for approval today, and I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay, Jochen, thank you very much for that. The local member, Hugh Evans, isn't here today, but I believe Councillor Roberts is going to say a few words on his behalf. I'll bring you in first when we start the debate. Jochen, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your appointment, and congratulations to Peter as well. Councillor Hugh Evans apologises he can't be here today. He's in London, but he's asked me to read a statement out for him as local member. As local member, I realise that the Planning Committee cannot revisit previous lawful permissions, even though they were either retrospective or misguided, such as a location of stables. However, there is a consistency here of amendments to the approved scheme that need to be highlighted. Retrospective seems to be the order of the day, and total disregard to AONB is alarming. We have a dark sky policy totally ignored on this site. We have a policy not to cut trees or pull down hedges totally ignored on this site. Inaccurate boundaries totally ignored. And now the doors again, retrospectively. Many people in the community are asking me, and this is Hugh Evans, not me, asking me, why is this allowed to happen? I have no answer, which is why I have requested this to the committee. This is bad practice. My request is for a watching brief on this site and the realisation that planning policies need to be respected, otherwise our enforcement teams will intervene. Diolch, Hugh.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other members wish to speak, please? Councillor Parry,
Can I just ask on page 37 of this one, response by pub.
Sorry, can you stand, please, so the camera gets you? Sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Congratulations for your post as well, both of you. Can I just ask on page 37 of this one, response to the public in objections, confidential representations received. Is that a common thing?
Thank you, Councillor Parry. No, it's not a common thing, but it can be done in certain circumstances where we feel that there are issues being raised, which we feel the identity of the objector or the respondent should be kept private. In this instance, that was done. We would always rather encourage people were transparent in their comments, but occasionally and on time, it's reasonable to allow a confidential comment. Thank you. Hope that helps.
Can I just come back on that one then? For other applications, how do you decide on that? Because a lot of people, if they see that happens, they would rather put their comments in without their names behind it, which maybe defeats some of the object of the job. So I just wonder how you decide whether somebody can be confidential or open.
I think I have to say that would be on a case by case and the actual circumstances presented to us. And I think if I went into too much detail in this, it would probably take away the confidentiality side of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Anyone else? Okay.
Diolch Cadeirydd a Llangyfarchiadau.
Diolch yn fawr.
Cadeirydd Peter. Cwestiwn sydd gen i i'r swyddogion yn fan hyn, parthed yr awyr dywyll yn yr does na ddim yn yr ymateb gen yr YMB, does na ddim sôn am effaith y goleuadau, ond mae'r cynghorydd lleol wedi sôn amdano fo ac y bobl sy'n cwyno, felly be di barn y swyddogion ynglyn â'r gola?
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Yeah, dark skies taken into account on this application. We have to remember that the application currently being considered relates to the design of the stables and the access. On what you might call the parent position, which was granted 2 years ago, there was a condition requiring details of lighting to be approved. Now, obviously, as a equestrian-based use, they've got lighting at the manege. Now, if they were on all the time, that would result in a problem with the dark skies. And the AOMB officer commented as such to myself. However, the details of the application of the lighting put to us, I think from memory, they're allowed to have the lighting on for up to 2 hours per day. So I think if we were to argue that to have any external lighting on in the AOMB for 2 hours a day during the winter months only is detrimental to the AOMB, I think we'd be really struggling to light anywhere. So I think on balance, given the need of the enterprise, the restrictions that the applicants were willing to accept, then that we felt we'd dealt with that. However, going back to what the speech that Councillor Hilditch had mentioned, the local member has asked for a watching brief effectively. So I think that to me is saying, okay, we are where we are, but we need to keep an eye on the site and make sure that it's being operated in accordance with the controls put in place. But back to the application in front of us, lighting doesn't form to a part of this. We're looking at the design of the stables and the access design. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor John Harlan, please. John.
Thank you, Mark. Paul, how many trees are involved, did I hear mentioned, being removed with this application?
Thank you, Councillor Harland. This application does not propose the loss of any trees. That's talking about historical works on the site. So this is a site that was developed during 2019-2020, I think, and the trees were assessed at that point. I think if you look at the photographs, there's a substantial amount of re-landscaping that has gone back on that site, and the loss of trees isn't a consideration on this particular application. That, again, is going back to the retrospective nature of previous applications. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Roberts, come back in, please.
Thank you. Just speaking as myself now. I just want to draw officers' attention to the highways report, and I'm just slightly uncomfortable with some of the wording, but it may be just me. It is the officer's opinion that the proposal impact upon highway safety is not unacceptable, given the visibility along the highway. The time vehicles would potentially have to wait on the highway and the fallback position of the gates is that the location be permitted development is lower in height. Officer consider that the proposal is acceptable. When I read that, in one thing, it's not unacceptable, but it is acceptable. So I just want a bit of clarity about, is it acceptable or unacceptable or not? The wording's a bit wishy-washy for me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just to clarify, it's acceptable. I think there are rooms for area where you'd be, in an ideal world, you'd be able to have a vehicle exiting the highway onto the site without any pause, but it's inevitable in this sort of location, such as a farmer's gateway, that you may have a large vehicle waiting on the highway. Not ideal, but acceptable in this location. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone else, members, or I'm going to move on to the vote. Okay, can we have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Chair, thank you.
Talking about. Okay. Okay. Going to do the vote roll, put name call out again.
I will do, Chair. You'll be sick of the sound of me before long, if you're not already. Members, the proposal is to grant in accordance with officer recommendation. So I'll read the roll call. If you're in favour of granting permission, then you indicate that you are for or obliged. If you wish to abstain, it's abstain or a matal, and if you're against the grant, it's an erbyn or against. So I'll just go through the roll. Councillor Brian Blakely.
For.
Councillor Karen Edwards. Cynghorydd Gwyneth Ellis.
Obliged.
Councillor James Elson. Councillor Chris Evans not here. Councillor John Harland.
John, we can't hear you, sorry.
Sorry, for.
Cynghorydd Hilditch Roberts.
Obliged.
Councillor Alan James. Cynghorydd Delith Jones.
Obliged.
Councillor Julie Matthews not voting. Councillor Terry Mendes. Councillor Wyn Mullen James.
For.
Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry. Councillor Peter Prendergast.
For.
Councillor Gareth Sandilands.
For.
Councillor Peter Scott. Councillor Andrew Tomlin.
For.
Cynghorydd Elwood Williams.
Obliged.
Councillor Mark Young.
For.
It's been carried unanimously.
So that's been carried. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll now move on to item number 11.
Chair, I'm sorry, we're having dreadful trouble with the translation. Somebody's talking on it, and there's a background talking in there.
Just go and sort that
Thank
out.
you.
Okay, we'll sort it. Sorry about that.
Just for 1 minute, Chair, do we get a result in terms of numbers of
I do apologise.
vote, please?
That's okay.
17. That's 17 votes in favour, none against, no abstentions.
Thank you, Alan. Sorry about that. Okay, members, I'll move now on to item 11, which is code 432022 0051 AC. The location is land adjacent to Alexandra Drive, Prestatyn, and it's the proposal for details of the construction and method statements and highways work submitted in accordance with conditions 4 and 5 of Plan Permission 4320200521 PF. Local members are Councillor Carol Holiday and Councillor Gareth Sandilands, and we have a public speaker, Mr. Stuart Andrews, who's going to talk to us now for.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations to yourself and Councillor Scott this morning. Good morning, all. My name is Stuart Andrew. I am the Design and Planning Director at Castle Green Homes, and we're the developer of this already approved scheme of Ford CAPEL and in Prestatyn. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning in respect to the discharging of the 2 remaining planning conditions relevant to this development. As is explained in your committee report, the application being discussed this morning is not for the scheme as a whole, which already has planning permission, having been approved by this committee last year. What has been brought to you today relates only to the proposed construction management plan and internal highways design of the scheme. The planning permission already granted required these details to be approved through the discharging of appropriate planning conditions, and as a result of a particular focus on the importance of these matters in this case, officers are asking you as the planning committee to make a decision to confirm their suitability. The construction management plan submitted has been reviewed in respect to the principle of development and its impact on residential amenity and been found to be entirely acceptable. At the request of the planning officer, it includes a communication strategy requiring us to provide written notice to local residents, the town council and ward councillors of the commencement of works and at key stages of the development. As part of this strategy, we had already sought to make arrangements with Councillor Sandilands, formerly of the town council and now one of the ward councillors, to discuss the implementation of the scheme. This was unfortunately prevented by the timing of the local elections. We hope for that meeting to now happen following approval of the proposals put forward today. In respect to the internal estate roads, your highways officers have no objections to the proposed design and are happy for these conditions to be approved as submitted. We've already provisionally agreed this and the future adoption of the estate roads with them through the Section 38 process. The discharging of these conditions today will enable the commencement of development of 102 already approved affordable homes, which will be built for delivery to local families through ADRA and to standards beyond the latest building regulations. All will be built to the energy efficiency standard EPC grade A, and around half will be built to Welsh Government's Beautiful Homes and Spaces standards, with some being bungalows designed specifically for residents in wheelchairs. These homes are only eligible to households on the council's social and intermediate rent housing lists, so it is 102 Denbighshire families, with many already living in Prestatyn, that will have the opportunity to move from potentially unsuitable or substandard accommodation into a new home that is built to excellent quality standards. The delivery of this scheme is one of the largest provisions of affordable housing in the county in some time, and is to the credit of the council officers and this committee that it can now be implemented with approval of the proposals in front of you today. I hope therefore that you agree with your officers and your committee report, which state that this application is entirely acceptable and that approval should be granted. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Jochen Vau. I am going to just bring officers in because there's some extra information. I think it's worth just clarifying that. So over to you, officers.
Thank you, Chair.
Jochen Vau.
Yes, I just wanted to bring members' attention to what's on the late representation sheet. I think as we're a new committee with new members, it's worth just reminding ourselves that the actual main permission for this development has already been granted. So therefore, the sort of principle of development, the layout of the site, the detailing has all been already approved. We can't revisit that today. This application is an approval of condition and it relates solely to the construction method statement of how the site is to be developed. So that's such as things like the hours of operation, what methods they would use for dust suppression, cleaning the wheels, and certain highway works in relation to creating the access. I just want to make sure that members are focused on that and realise that this isn't an application that can be used to either delay or uphold a development that's already got planning permission. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I will start the debate now. If anyone wishes to speak, please.
Yep.
Okay, and I'll bring the local member in first. Happy birthday, and Councillor Sandilands.
Congratulations, Mark, and thanks very much for the best wishes. Alexander Drive, off the land off Alexander Drive. Well, firstly, I think we need a new name because it's going to be a new estate, a brand new estate in Denbighshire, 102 houses, potentially a very large one. This is about the delivery of it. We've reviewed where we are at this moment in time. The permission has been given. We now concentrate on how it's going to be going. I'm quite happy about the inclusion of a comms plan to all residents. It provides the openness and willingness of the developer to look at further details and the agreement. My view is that this is the start of a 3-year process. It's going to be a long build. So an awful lot of residents are going to be affected, not just on Alexander Drive, but the surrounding properties that have the deliveries going to and through it. It's all about the attention to detail from now on. I know this question to officers now, how is it to vary on conditions once this has been gone through this process so far? For instance, vehicle access, open air play areas, tree planting, and the maintenance going forward. So this is something that we need to look at. The developer has had conversations with myself. He is quite open to public meetings with both the residents, site meetings, and of course the police and other agencies going forward. So this is a start of a constant process, and this is all about how it's being delivered and what's being delivered to some detail. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that, Jochen Vow. Anyone else? Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Pardon?
Yeah, good.
I'd just like to say I don't see anywhere within this bundle any photographs of the area down which the construction traffic will travel to this site. I'm not sure if that's deliberate, but it is a highly residential area, Forth Pantycelyn down through Forth Caerfelyn. It troubles me greatly, as it did in the application, but that is what it is now, that we are going to have 3.5 years worth of heavy construction traffic travelling down Forth Pantycelyn through Forth Caerfelyn to this site. I do urge that we reconsider that is the construction traffic access route. The farm itself has access. The farm owners are the people that have sold this land for this development, and I would encourage that we speak to them to gain access through their farm road to this site and disrupt only them, rather than disrupt for 3.5 years an awful lot of residents on a family estate, which that Forth Pantycelyn houses a children's park. It troubles me greatly, and lots of speed bumps. It troubles me greatly that the amount of traffic that's going to be going down that road for a long period of time. I'd urge that is reconsidered, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. Officers, respond to that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlin. Yes, understand, but we have to deal with what's in front of us. I think we can't prevent somebody from using a public highway, as that's what they would be using. They're entitled to drive on that highway. We have looked at highway officers have looked at the highway conditions of that route, the obvious route along the main road, and they've done a survey, a condition survey, and they've concluded that the route is suitable for that type of traffic to move. What I'd probably sort of put to members is that I think if you look at any housing estate being built in any town, you're going to have construction traffic passing through residential areas. I think it would be very difficult, understanding the background to the main application on this, but I think it'd be very difficult for us to argue why in this particular location where the road widths that access the site, the fact the access has been agreed already with highways, that's acceptable, how we could do it. What you'd see in the construction management is that obviously there are construction time deliveries that are limited in terms of time, so that we're trying as best we can to avoid deliveries occurring at peak times. So I'd say I understand the concerns, but I think we have to deal with what's in front of us. And ultimately, I think that it's unlikely that we could prevent a developer from using the public highway without any genuine reason. It's very similar to what happens in many towns when a estate's being built. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Before I come back to the local member, anyone else like to ask any questions? Okay. Councillor John Harland.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, well, it's obviously desirable to get a route that doesn't go past properties. I would point out that the very, very useful speed bump arena, if you like, on the approach to the area will slow traffic down and will stop speeding trucks coming into the site. They were often paid by the load, if you like. So that will help. I'd just like to point out that the speed bump sort of area there will help.
Okay, thank
you.
Well, anyone else? I'll go back to the local member, Councillor Sandilands, please. Talking about.
Thank you, Councillor Young. I should have made it quite clear, and we have had discussions about alternative access to the site, and that has progressed somewhat, but we are based on what we're presented with today, not what could happen in the future. So that was my question to officers about the variation of that in the future, and can we have a look at that in the future, and would it need a delegated decision by officers, or would it have to go to committee to something like that? As I say, the developer is open and willing to look at that particular issue. And as to regard to speed bumps, I would say it's an active way of pollution of more of the highways. These vehicles have got heavy loads on, which carry a lot of dust and pollution. And by going up and down these bumps, it's hardly going to improve that. And the local environment, the exhaust streams that are coming on from that stopping and starting is currently excelling from the environment. But just going back to it, I am willing to look with the developer at improving access to this site, and that is something we're looking at this moment in time to go to public meetings. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Would you like to respond, Paul?
Thank you, Councillor Sandilands. Yes, noted your point there about there may be alternative routes that are being explored. I don't think they themselves are without their problems, and they'll need to be looked at. But obviously, if a scheme gets agreed between the relevant parties, third-party landowners, developer, and the local community, we would have a look at that as officers with yourselves and work out the best way of trying to introduce that if it was acceptable. So yeah, there is always room for manoeuvre on these sort of applications. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lads. That's very helpful. Anyone else? I'm going to ask for a proposal. No, everyone's happy. Do you have a proposal, please?
I'll propose that we approve.
Thank you, Councillor Millie. Okay, do you have a seconder, please?
I'll second, my chair.
Councillor Scott, Jochen Vale. Okay, we'll do the roll call now, please.
Okay, again, it's been proposed that the officer recommendation to grant be approved. So if you're in agreement with that, it's for or obliged. If you are against, it's against or an erbyn. And if you wish to abstain, it's abstain or a matal. Councillor Brian Blakely.
For.
Councillor Karen Edwards. Horace Ellis.
Obliged.
Councillor James Elson. Councillor John Harland.
For.
Horace Hilditch Roberts.
Obliged.
Councillor Alan James. Horace Delta Jones.
Obliged.
Councillor Julie Matthews not voting. Councillor Terry Mendes. Councillor Raj Metri not in attendance. Wynne Mullen James.
For.
Horace Mervyn Parry.
Obliged.
Councillor Peter Prendergast.
For.
Councillor Gareth Sandilands.
For.
Councillor Peter Scott.
For.
Councillor Andrew Tomlin.
Against.
Horace Elwood Williams.
Obliged.
Councillor Mark Young. For.
Yeah. Ellie, did you want to come in, Ellie Chard?
Yes, and congratulations, Mark. I had trouble this morning logging on. I know Jeanette wanted to be on planning, and I have sent correspondence, but I am the representative from RHYL South on the planning. So, yeah, so
Gary, we've spoken on that, and we'll update you now. Gary, please.
Yeah, I've not had formal notification
Oh.
In respect of that for this meeting.
Oh.
But the list of members I've got still includes Councillor Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones. Clearly, we can look at that for the next meeting, but I don't have,
okay.
have you down as a member of this committee.
Oh dear. Well, in that case, I will be observing and I'll keep quiet, but I might come in on certain issues. Okay. Thank you all.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor Earlychard. We'll make sure that's sorted, and we'll go to the countdown of the votes.
The votes were 15 for, 1 against, and 1 abstention.
So that's been carried. Jochen members, thank you. Okay, I will go now to item 12, which is page 147, code 4420 220130 PF. The location is land, part of the garden, the Rise, RHYL Road, Rhuddlan. The proposal is to erect 4 number dwellings together with access road and associated works. Local members, Councillor Ann Davis and Councillor Arwell Roberts. Officer recommendation is to grant, and we have a speaker, Mr. Roberts Jones, please.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. We'll start the count when you start speaking, sir.
Fantastic, thanks ever so much. Good morning. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this proposal before you today. My name is Robert Jones and I represent the building plot. We're the agent for this application, acting on behalf of our clients, Mr. C. Roberts and Mrs. J. Goodrick. I'm a qualified architect registered with the ARB and a member of the RIBA with over 15 years experience in the industry. Having led the design development, application submission and preceding appeals, I'm well positioned to provide an overview of the proposal to date. In February 2022, a full plan application was submitted to the LPA for the development of 0.2 hectares of land for the erection of 4 dormer-style properties, including associated access to the rear garden of the Rise. The submission of this application followed the refuse of an outline application at committee in August 2021. It's important to highlight that the subsequent application before you today and the outline application determined at committee are identical in respect of design and submission content. This preceding outline application was refused by the committee for 2 reasons. Number 1, the impact on the living conditions of nearby residents with particular reference to the outlook and privacy. And number 2, highway safety. Following this refusal, a subsequent appeal was submitted, and in November 2021, the appeal was dismissed. It is, however, fundamental to draw reference to the planning inspectorate's findings. He concluded, after taking account of all the evidence before me, whilst I concluded in favour of the appellant that the proposal would not be detrimental to residential amenity or highway safety, nonetheless, for the reasons given in the preceding paragraph, the lack of suitable mechanism to deliver the required financial contributions renders the proposal unacceptable, and as a result, it must be dismissed. Ultimately, the appeal failed. However, this was due to a technicality regarding the appropriate triggers for both the affordable housing and open space contributions. Nevertheless, the detail provided in the report categorically concluded that the reasons for refusal were not valid as we had suspected. Subsequently, the planning officer report accompanying today's meeting states that officers consider that there's been a clear guide from the planning inspectorate that the development is considered acceptable and would not be detrimental to the character of the area, amenity of residents, or highway safety. As such, officers consider there are no material planning considerations to reasonably resist the scheme. Having now had a clear decision on these material considerations by the planning inspectorate, any unevidenced reasons for refusal on these issues by the council would clearly be considered unreasonable behaviour. We are hopeful, following the inspectorate's preceding judgment and the LPA's recommendations for approval, that you can support this application today. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Jochen, thank you for that. And I'll go to Councillor Peter Scott, who's going to talk on behalf of Ann Davis, Councillor, local member. Jochen.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, Anne sent me an email last night saying unfortunately she had an appointment at 10:10 this morning, which she can't cancel at this late stage. I'm not really certain of whether this is the right thing or if this has already been passed, but I'll read what Anne sent to me. Please could you register my concerns? And she's put overdevelopment, access constraints, drive is the width of a single garage only, not wide enough for emergency vehicles, impact on residents' amenities and highway safety. She's just added at the end, conditions if granted, protection of adjacent boundary fences during building works and removal of many mature, not the removal of many mature trees. And finally, is there enough space between the new dormer and the existing bungalows? I suspect most of that's been passed at previous planning, but is there anything there that could be highlighted or brought up from the officers? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. And I'll bring in officers now. Jochen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Scott. Yeah, I think if you read through the planning report, it's quite clear that the previous appeal decisions, there have actually been 2 previous appeal decisions, fully address those concerns. It's quite clear to officers that if we try and go down any line to do with amenity, visual amenity or residential amenity, access, any issue on this, I mean, literally the last planning appeal basically said the scheme's acceptable, except they haven't done a legal agreement for the planning inspectorate. What I would point out in this instance is that the developers have agreed in principle to pay just under £55,000 towards affordable housing and £5,000 for open space. Now, if the way it would work in this scenario, as we're not at appeal, we're planning committee, it would be if we resolve to grant permission, we wouldn't release the decision until the legal agreement to secure that financial money for affordable housing open space has been signed by both parties. So, and if that's not agreed within 12 months, we'd be reporting it back to planning committee to have a reconsider on whether or not it was acceptable. But all we can sort of pull from the inspector's decisions is that, without wanting to be too blunt, there's nothing wrong with the application. We've got no grounds to refuse this. If we did try, I suspect very strongly we'd be held to be unreasonable given the previous rulings of the inspectorate. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I'm going to go to Councillor Parry now. Jochen, Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose this approval. I mean, there's quite a lot of work being done backs and forwards with this application now. I mean, there's no real objections from any of the Dŵr Cymru. The strategic housing policies fit in with what we want in Denbighshire. We're after some houses. The site is in the development boundary of RHUDDLAN. As it's been said earlier, it was refused in 2021 of the grounds of living conditions and nearby residents and highway safeties. These in the appeal were not a problem to the officer. It was a technical reason that it was refused on the grounds, as Paul has just mentioned, on the 106 agreements, which now has been put in place. And as long as we don't allow it to go through until those 1 agreement certificates have been signed and delivered, then I think we should go through. I mean, there's a 55,000 affordable housing offer there. There's 5k to the open space. And just for the new members, maybe on page 173, and there's the 154, which shows the inspector's report showing why that this application should be okay. So I propose we approve this application. Let's get it done.
Okay, thanks for that. Do you have it?
Yeah, just really to encourage what Merv has said, and the bluntness of Paul is that my reading of this application is quite clear. It was kicked out on a technicality. If we were to go against this as a committee again, we would be actually incurring cost on the authority. So I think it's a crack on, and let's move it for me.
Okay. Are you happy to second?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think members are in the swing now. So if you're in favour, it's for. If you're against, it's against. And if you want to abstain, you may abstain. Councillor Brian Blakely.
Abstain.
Councillor Karen Edwards. Cynghorydd Gwyneth Ellis.
Abide.
Councillor James Elson. Councillor Chris Ellis not here. Councillor Harland.
For.
Cynghorydd Hugh Hilditch Roberts.
O blaid.
Councillor Alan James.
For.
Cynghorydd Delith Jones.
O blaid.
Councillor Julie Matthews not voting. Councillor Terry Mendes. Councillor Wyn Mullin James.
For.
Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry.
O blaid.
Councillor Peter Prendergast.
For.
Councillor Gareth Sandilands.
For.
Councillor Peter Scott.
For.
Councillor Andrea Tomlin.
For.
Cynghorydd Elwood Williams.
O blaid.
Councillor Mark Young.
For.
The result of that vote, Chair, is that there were 15 votes in favour and 2 abstentions.
So that's carried. And can I just ask members, would you like a quick comfort break? Yeah, okay. Okay, just 10 minutes if you can, joking about. And I'll go straight on to item 8, page 47, code number 15 2021 1028 PF. Location Salem Chapel, ERYRYS Mould. Proposal conversion of a chapel to form a holiday let accommodation unit and associated works. Local member is Councillor Terry Mendes. Officer recommendation is to grant, and I'll go straight into debate, and I'll take the local member first if he wishes to say anything. Jock about.
Thank you, Chair. I am aware of this building, and ERYRYS is quite a small village, and it's prominent. The building itself is quite tired. And would be an asset to the village in the local area if it's redeveloped into a holiday lets. The area does stand, it's in an area of outstanding natural beauty and a lot of walkers and ramblers. So as I say, it would be with a bit of an asset, particularly to the local pub, which is about 30 yards away. But having looked at the concerns of the local residents, it all revolves around the parking in front of the building, or where they propose to park the 2 cars in between that building and the road. And their concerns that it might be too narrow. One of the concerns is that there's no footpaths on the lanes, but having said that, there isn't any footpaths along any of the lanes, so it's pedestrians do have to walk on the road. The officer's recommendation is to grant this, and I might be guided here by Paul, the legal officer. Is there any way we could maybe put an amendment so that the parking is to the far end of the building where that big tree is? They've got land at the back and to the side. But that's really my only comment.
Okay, thanks for that, Jockenbauer, and I'll go to officers now. Please, boys, you can respond.
Thank you for that, Chair. Yeah, again, I think as we've said before, we should be dealing with what's in front of us. I think if we change the parking at this point through a condition, especially if we're looking to where there's a tree, we're potentially materially changing the application. We'd have to go back and start reconsultations. What I do know on this application is that officers looked, following the comments of the OMB committee, about that if we could try to avoid the loss of that wall, which is quite attractive along the highway, we looked to see if there were alternatives for parking. Officers from highways and planning, in conjunction with the applicants, they couldn't find an alternative. What I would then reiterate is that the highway officers are happy with the parking provision as shown. It's a 2-bedroom holiday let, so our parking standards require a maximum of 2 parking spaces. They've got 2 spaces. They would also look at the fallback position, and think this is possibly the most important point. As a chapel, it falls into the use class D1, and there's a whole range of other uses within that, which it could become without the need for planning permission. So historically, it's been a chapel. It's got a capacity of 70 people. You look at what the potential highway implications of that, if that was being used. It could also change to a child's creche. without planning permission, and you'd be looking at the number of vehicles movements that would generate, and that would be without any parking whatsoever. So I think what we've got in front of us here, whilst understanding the concerns of the locals, I'd look at our technical consultees in highways who say, actually, compared to what the existing situation is, this is a betterment. It's, again, not ideal. It's not unacceptable, I think, as I may have said to Hugh Roberts earlier, but it's not unacceptable, but it is an improvement. So we would encourage you, say, whilst understanding the concerns of the residents, we believe that in a planning point of view, the parking layout is acceptable as it's shown. Thank you. I hope that helps.
Ready for answer, Jochen Bow. Anyone else like to speak on this, or do we have a proposal? All right, Jochen Bow, do you have a seconder?
I'll second it. Yeah.
That's a Paddy, Jochen Bow. Okay, we'll go to the name call for the vote now, Jochen Bow.
Thank you, members. Just remind you that the proposal is to grant. So if you're in favour of that, it's for, and if you're against, it's against. And of course, you can always abstain. Councillor Brian Blakely.
For.
Councillor Karen Edwards. Cynghorydd Gwyneth Ellis.
O blaid.
Councillor James Elson. Councillor Chris Evans not here. Councillor John Harland.
For.
Cynghorydd Hugh Hilditch Roberts.
O blaid.
Councillor Alan James.
For.
Cynghorydd Delith Jones.
O blaid.
Councillor Jean Weston. Councillor Terry Mendes. Councillor Wyn Mullen James.
For.
Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry.
O blaid.
Councillor Pete Prendergast. Councillor Pete Prendergast. Councillor Prendergast. Okay. Councillor Gareth Sandilands.
For.
Councillor Peter Scott.
For.
Councillor Andrew Tomlin.
For.
Cynghorydd Elfed Williams. Cynghorydd Elfed Williams. Okay, not present. Councillor Mark Young.
For.
There were 15 votes cast in favour, Chair, no abstentions and no votes against.
Okay, Jochen Bow, so that's carried. Thank you, members. I'll go on to item 9 now, page 85, code number 16/2022, 0335, PF, location, PLAS, Eastern Manor, LLANBEDR, DYFFRYN, RHYF, proposed erection of extension to side dwelling to form ground floor garage with bedroom above. The local member is Councillor Hugh Williams. Officer recommendation is to grant. Would officers like to say anything before we go into the debate?
Just pointing out that we've got Chris Evans, conservation architect.
Can members turn their mics off when they're having a bit of a problem with their throat, please? Okay. Okay. Anyone want to raise any points here, please, members? Councillor Paddy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think the local member who's not with us here now, but he was in favour of this application. I can see in the summary on page 102 that the officers are in favour of it, having looked at the work and the comments made by the Community Council on the listed building and the character of the building. So it looks like everybody's happy with it. So maybe the conservation officer might give his overview of it, but I'd like to propose we grant this application.
Okay, would Chris like to say anything? Are you in for, yeah, just a summary? Jochen Bow, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to say this is a contemporary extension on a listed building, and which is supported in conservation policy if it's designed well enough and the materials are sympathetic. In this case, it's detached, but is linked with a glass link, which keeps it separate and clearly shows it as a standalone building. So it's keeping the form and nature of the listed building intact. So that's why I've supported it in this case. And the materials, slate roof, timber boarding in black colour, which matches the existing building, where there is black timber and white, is why I'm supportive of this application.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Very helpful. Okay, Councillor Roberts, please.
Thank you. I've got to be honest, when I read the papers, I was quite surprised that you were supporting this application, considering the numerous challenges that I've had here in RHYF on certain areas like Morug Street in the past and still have at the moment. You know, the illustrations that are shown are of the existing, which is very much of character, and I would, looking at that extension, is something that I would expect to find in maybe the Warren in Aberystwyth sort of feel, if I'm being honest, which is not what I expect to find in LLANBEDR or RHYF. So with your conservation hat on, how does something that looks more chalet look? And I don't feel it complements a historical building. So I just want to understand how you've come to that conclusion, if possible.
Yeah, I can understand your feelings on that. It's the past few years, conservation has preferred to go down the route of contemporary extensions, which are served by a link separating the buildings from the original buildings. In this case, it's a garage on the ground floor, so it's basically an outbuilding with some floor space above. It's a traditional form with a slate pitched roof and the boarding as an outbuilding, but I can understand why you think it's out of place. But in my view, it's been designed well enough, and the materials are quality enough to warrant it as an acceptable application in this case.
Yeah. So just for clarification for future applications that I've got in RHYF, providing that the existing building is intact and that it is an addition, a contemporary addition, you as a conservation officer feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, as long as the design is quality enough and it fits in with the set, doesn't affect, it's not detrimental to the setting of the listed building and the surroundings, then if it fits in, it's acceptable.
That's great.
I'll just bring Paul in.
Yes, Paul.
Thank you. Just to tie to that, because there's obviously there's listed building issues here and there's planning issues, but I think as that principle of what works on one building doesn't necessarily work on another. You know that we've had these conversations plenty of times. It's definitely a matter of every case on its own merits. I think if you look at the drawings in the report, and apologies, I don't have a report with page numbers on, but there's the proposed front elevation. And you can see that the actual historic building itself sits there on the left, and then the proposed garage with sunroom thing is on the right. You can see from the sort of the form and the positioning of it that it's subordinate to the main building and it's set back. I think that from a planning perspective, when we look at our planning application policy for extensions to dwellings, it meets all those tests. And then we've got the added on top of that, we've got the input of Chris, who basically said that the choice of materials and the siting of this, when you approach that building, you get a sense of what the historic building still is. That building, the proposed extension doesn't dominate or swamp it or deteriorate. So that's this case. But I would say that doesn't mean we'll be sticking that on everything. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Do we have a proposal, or does anyone else wish to speak?
Sorry, I thought you had a proposal, Chair. I would mind seconding.
Seconded, yeah.
Just to confirm, Chair, Councillor Mervyn Parry proposed, and Councillor Peter Scott seconded.
Talking about. Okay, we'll go on to vote now, if that's okay. Read out the names now. Gary.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the recommendation is to grant. So if you're in favour of that, it's for, and if you're against, it's against. Councillor Brian Blakely.
For.
Councillor Karen Edwards. Cynghorydd Gwyneth Ellis.
O blaid.
Councillor James Elson. Councillor John Harland.
For.
Cynghorydd Hugh Hilditch Roberts.
Blaid.
Councillor Alan James. Cynghorydd Delith Jones.
Obliged.
Councillor Julie Matthew, Councillor Terry Mendes. Councillor Wynne James.
For.
Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry.
O blaid.
Councillor Peter Prendergast.
For.
Councillor Gareth Sandilands.
For.
Councillor Peter. For. Councillor Andrea Tomlin.
For.
Cynghorydd Elfed Williams. Okay. Councillor Mark Young.
For.
Sixteen votes in favour, Chair, none against, no abstentions.
Okay, Jock, that's been approved. I'll go on to item number 10, which is the same site location, but the application number is slightly different. 16/20/22 0336 LB. So same location, but for listed building application. So I'm hoping we can go. Would you like to say? Okay, officer would like to say a couple of words. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just as again, as we're a new committee with new members, it's worth pointing out that you've got two different sets of legislation that a listed building has to go through. Yes, it needs planning permission, but it also needs listed building consent. We normally run with the planning application first, because when you consider the application, you are taking into account a planning policy, so extensions to dwellings, which applies to all applications, but you're also taking into account the impact on the listed building. So in essence, if you've granted planning application for an extension to a listed building, yes, you've then got to consider the listed building application, but it usually follows, because you have to take that impact on the listed building into account on a planning application, which therefore normally follow that you'd be granting listed building consent as well. So it's the fact that we have basically a sort of tandem system legislation. I know there are moves afoot in Wales to potentially put them together so that we don't have this duplication, but that's just to explain why we've got the two applications that are identical. Thank you very much, Chair.
That's very helpful, Jock and Val, thank you. Okay, are we happy to go straight to the vote? Okay, if you can, we can have a proposer and a seconder.
I propose, then we go to the vote. Whatever, second.
Second, yeah. Yeah, Jock and Val. And we'll read your names out for the vote now, Jock and Val.
Okay, so the recommendation is to grant. So if you're in agreement with that, it's for, and if you're not, it's against. Councillor Brian Blakely.
For.
Councillor Karen Edwards. Cynghorydd Gwyneth Ellis.
Obliged.
Councillor James Elson. Councillor John Harland.
For.
Cynghorydd Hugh Hilditch Roberts. Councillor Alan James.
For.
Cynghorydd Delith Jones.
Obliged.
Councillor Terry Mendes. Councillor Wynne James.
For.
Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry.
Obliged.
Councillor Prendergast.
For.
Councillor Sandilands.
For.
Councillor Peter Scott.
For.
Councillor Andrew Tomlin.
For.
Cynghorydd Elfed Williams. Jim on my, sorry, Jude Allen. Alan in will. Councillor Mark Young. Councillor Mark Young.
For.
That's 16 votes in favour, Chair, none against, no abstentions.
Okay, Jock and Val, that's been moved, thank you.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Item 13, page 185, code 4520210738 PC. Location is 7 Cleese Walsh, RHYL, LL 184FR. The proposal retrospective application for the change of use of dwelling use class C3 to form a house of multiple occupancy, use class C4 for 4 people. The local members are Councillor Brian Blakely and Councillor Cheryl Williams. Officer recommendation is to grant, and I believe we're going to take on this. Can we just clarify how we're going to vote?
Chair, may I come in? May I come in, Chair?
Yeah, go on then, Brian.
Just to say that Councillor Brian Blakely and Councillor Cheryl Williams are not the members for this ward. The ward was split at the last election. It is now the Trecklewellan ward, which is now Windmill and James and Michelle Walker, Councillor Michelle Walker. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Brian, and apologies. Okay, and I believe we're going to take item 13, 14 and number 15 on there together. Is that okay?
The proposal is that they're all similar applications, as I understand, and that the issues to be considered are the same in respect of all of them. So the issue would be to have a debate in respect of those issues and then take a vote in respect of all three, unless any members had any objection to that course of action.
Okay, I'll bring in local member. You happy with that?
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations. Yeah, these three applications are all very similar, and they are for hospital workers to have residency while during the time that they actually are living in the area. The difficulty here is the wording, as we all very much know, HMO. And we are always very wary in RHYL of HMO, and we do have a policy against HMOs. So I would ask on that basis, members to consider this application, please.
Valid point. I'm going to ring it, the officers in now just to clarify that point, because it's been raised by a number of members. If you can clarify the reason for going against our own policy, would be great. Talking about.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've actually got an officer from the policy section here who can hopefully help that. So Lara Griffiths is here.
Orodaw Pow. Yes, good morning, everybody. Yes, clearly we have LDP policy BSC 7, which very clearly says that as a council, we will not be granting permission for houses of multiple occupation. The LDP was adopted in 2013, but in 2015, a new use class was introduced, which was a C4 use class, which was for small houses of multiple occupation. So they're still considered to be houses of multiple occupation, but very much of the smaller variety, only for between 3 and 6 residents. The original policy was an attempt to combat the increasing number of large houses of multiple occupation that we were seeing in particular areas, particularly in West RHYL. And to a great extent, this policy has been very successful, accompanied with redevelopment schemes in the area, and also by implementing additional licensing and regeneration efforts in this area. The quality of the housing, particularly in West RHYL, I think has improved significantly over the time. What we're faced with here is perhaps something more akin to a house share, which some of us may be more familiar with. Certainly as a young professional, I shared houses when I was starting work, and these are very specifically managed by a registered social landlord, and they have a contract with the health board, and they're specifically for housing overseas nurses when they first come to the area. So we felt, in view of the fact that we had confidence that these properties would be well managed, they're high quality accommodation, and that they would be serving a purpose in terms of housing key workers in the area. That is why we felt that there was potentially a reason to go against a policy which is probably somewhat out of date now, and through the replacement LDP, obviously we'll be looking at this issue again. So those were the main reasons for recommending approval.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'll go to Councillor Joan Butterfield, please now. Jochen Joan.
Thank you, Chairman, and congratulations on your appointment as Chair of the Planning Authority in Denbighshire. I'd like to go on and speak about all three of the retrospective applications that are before you this morning. The 3 semi-detached dwellings were purchased by a small housing association, Cartref Conway, and as far as I know, they're on an estate. It's not in my ward, but I'm speaking as a councillor in RHYL with concerns over this change of retrospective certificate being granted. I think I'm right in saying that when I say that this estate caters for families, most of them being in owner occupation. And our policy, BSC 7, houses in multiple occupancy and self-contained flats, proposals which would lead to the creation of houses of multiple occupancy or self-contained flats will not be permitted. That is in our policy document, BSC 7. The applicant's letter for this change of use is, I believe, very concerning, and I believe is unacceptable, and is suggesting that the users will be recruited from abroad, so it's acceptable for them to be housed in what is considered by the council substandard forms of accommodation. The cover letter goes on to say that the use would be going and the property would act as a halfway house for the health workers who would be rehoused as and when an alternative housing was available. Well, we did have a meeting on Monday, the 1st of June, with the Health Authority, the high-ranking officers of the Health Authority that were questioned in and around the closure of the nurses' home and doctor accommodation on site on the Cadwallader CLWYD Hospital. They had no accommodation at all, no provision for accommodation, and certainly no ongoing accommodation. They were desperately wishing to appoint housing staff, of course, nursing staff, of course, but they had no forward planning as to where these nurses and doctors would be housed. This raises further concerns should the families that are going to be housed in the 3 houses that have already been earmarked for this type of accommodation. If they bring the families along there, they will quite clearly be overcrowding and we would have to move them on. And it does say that they would be quite content to grant this. Our authority would be quite content to grant this for a 5-year period. Well, that is, I believe, unacceptable. The council have spent over the last 30 years, 20 years at least, but going into 30 years of trying to get rid of HMOs in the RHYL area. It's spreading out right across RHYL now, as we can see from this application, that is moving into our accommodation that is a residential accommodation for families. We're now turning the clock back over 20 years to consider this application, and should it be permitted, this would set a precedent and planning use that HMOs are now acceptable with this new spurious planning use for smaller conversions. The housing associations are not amateurs at this business of buying and letting. They're all aware that they're moving into the social housing that is so desperately needed for all our families within Denbighshire. 3 and 4 bedrooms houses are in great demand right across the county. So I believe that I'm not a member of this committee, but obviously I am opposed to this application, and I hope that we do refuse this application and put it back into the original use for family housing for the needs of our social needs in Denbighshire. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Butterfield. I'll bring in Councillor Sandilands, please.
Yes, thank you. It was really useful to attend the briefing session that was provided yesterday afternoon. I found it very useful to find out a bit more about this. The fact that we're needing on one side a lot more doctors and nurses because of the short the recruitment policy. We're missing doctors and nursing. We need them. We need to get them from out overseas. So I see this as allowing extra accommodation. And my question was to Angela Loftus, actually, it was referred to, and I'll just go to flick my screen, so bear with me. I asked her a question about how multiple occupation properties are recorded on the index of multiple deprivation, because what we don't want is to pass this and then have it a mark against us in the overall statistics, bringing RHYL award down, which doesn't need to be marked down. And while this argument may be used that some HMO accommodation is in poor repair, colleagues in the public protection have done a lot of work in licensing properties to ensure they meet these acceptable standards. This is not going to be reflected in the index of multiple deprivation, which measured overcrowding. The measures to percentage of people in overcrowding based on the census in 2011 is based on the poor housing quality. So HMOs can have this bad standard, which everybody associates it with, but this is a special condition which is allowed on the planning, which is for emergencies like these, which we do need more doctors, more nurses. So I'm actually in for this in this case. And I understand this is also for a temporary basis with a limited time period. So perhaps this can happen when we have this crisis, and in the meantime, the hospitals can find extra accommodation, more appropriate housing for these doctors and nurses. But I think in this circumstances, it's needed, and it's needed now. So, and this is retrospective as well. So this will carry out this, whatever we decide today, will probably continue for the next 6 to 12 months anyway. So I would recommend this that goes ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Is that a proposal, councillor?
Yes.
Okay,
I'd like to second that, please.
And we have a second, thank you. Okay, Brian, Councillor Brian Blakely, please. Brian.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My concern, and I'm getting concern, is coming to me from, as the homeless champion in RHYL, it's coming from people that, and we're just coming out of COVID, that have Section 21 against them because of the rent problems they've had, having to pay rent, that are now being stuck into hotels in RHYL. We're looking for 4-bed houses. Yes, we're able, and we can't find them, and yet we're being told that we have 3 that is going up on the Aberkinsey for doctors and nurses. Now, good God, we do need doctors and nurses, and we must find accommodation for them. But I actually feel that this is wrong at this time. I have people shouting at me that are homeless, wanting to know why that these properties can be used to home people maybe from out of the country. Admittedly, as I said before, doctors and nurses, the accommodation needs to be found, but I feel this is wrong at this time when we have so many homeless families with 4 or 5 children that are in the Westminster Hotel and various other hotels in RHYL that need to be homed, and they're told we haven't got them, and yet there on Aberkinsey we have 3 properties. It really does get very upsetting when people are stuck with no properties at all, no homes at all, and yet this sort of thing happens. I'll leave it at that. I'm not objecting to it. I'm just sort of ashamed as homeless champion that we have so many people, and yet there are properties, but these properties I feel should be going to the homeless, and that our doctors and nurses should be found other properties, and I'm sure they can. As Jones mentioned, the homes at our local hospital that housing our doctors and nurses is not being used. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. And Councillor Harlan, did you wish to come in, John?
Yeah, there's some really good talk there from Gareth, Brian, etc. I was going to say that these people need to be, welcomed into the community. We still need NHS staff, and they need somewhere to live. But yeah, it's a dilemma, isn't it? You know, as Brian rightly pointed out, you know, that we've got so many homeless people in accommodation elsewhere in the county, you know, B&Bs and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a it's a dilemma. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, John. And it's difficult, and it's that balancing act which isn't easy. And I will bring in officers on some of the points now. Jochen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up on a few points made there by Councillor Butterfield and Councillor Blakely. I think we've got to be clear here that yes, these dwellings are owned by Cartrevy Conwy, but that doesn't mean they're actually tied in any way to be affordable housing or social. They're actually premises that that company bought with its own cash effectively, and they're not restricted in through any legal agreement or any planning control to be that. They're open market dwellings. They can do with them what they want in terms of so if this is refused, it doesn't mean that they'll be then given to people on the waiting list for housing. It doesn't mean that it will necessarily be used. We can't force that issue. They could literally rent it out to anybody on the open market, or they could sell it to whoever they want it. So I think we've got to move away from that fear that we're actually losing something from the community. They are just open market houses. And I think that's what I'd probably sort of mention to any member that's got concerns. I know where the concerns are coming from. We all know the history of RHYL with HMOs and indeed many towns and cities. You have to actually look at what's in front of you, though. We know we've got a policy that has been that actually predates the definition of what we're looking at. So we've got to identify what the actual harm is going to be. We're not losing any social housing as a result of this if it's granted. Can we argue that 4 people living in that house, or either three of the houses, would 4 people living there actually harm the character of the area? Well, that's quite a hard case to build, if you can imagine it. We're talking about 12 people across 3 houses. That's very hard to argue. And then the backup for that would be, you know, it is only a short-term one. We can assess the impacts. We're suggesting a 5-year condition. If we granted it for 5 years, in 5 years' time, you'd soon know whether or not that had a detrimental impact on the community. We'd see whether that problems that I think the problems or the fears people have are all perceptions. There's nothing we can actually tangibly put an evidence base together for, which is what you would need at an appeal situation. You'd need to have a sound evidence base to demonstrate what the problem is. You're more likely to have that in 5 years' time after you've given it a bit of a chance to run to see if there is a problem. There may not be, there may be. That's the officer's recommendation based on what Lara Griffiths has said at the start about the background to the policy, the fact that actually this type of HMO didn't exist when that policy was written. That's another thing to bear in mind, that if you're sitting in an appeal, a planning inspector would start to take the policy apart and say, so this was written in 2012 and it was about HMOs where it was 6 people or more. But we're looking at a HMO that didn't exist until 2015, which then defined it as 4 people. So it's a different sort of HMO to what the policy actually refers to. So that would be quite a sticky wicket, as they would say, in an appeal situation, because that policy doesn't relate directly to what we're looking at. Excuse me. So I would just try and focus members' minds on, you know, what are the actual impacts of this proposal, and look at the officer recommendation. We feel confident that given the controls that are in place, and I'd direct you towards the 2 conditions at the back of the report, which actually limit it to 4 key workers per dwelling, that in our opinion is sufficient to mean that there will be no detrimental impact as a result of granting permission for these changes of use. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you for that very thorough response, Paul. And I'm going to bring in Councillor Butterfield in a second. I've just got one question myself. If this is approved, does the licence make sure the housing can only be used for health workers? Can you confirm that? Because you've put a lot of weight on that, and I think it's worth asking the question.
Yeah, we're suggesting conditions that limit the occupancy to health workers. Thank you.
That's very helpful, Jochen. Councillor Joan Butterfield, please.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back on this one. I do realise that it is very emotive and emotional, obviously. We've a need on both sides, but I believe that we have to get some realism here, and that they are supposing with the 5-year restriction that we will perhaps revisit in 5 years, or it will end in 5 years. That's supposing that our housing needs have gone in 5 years. That is not going to happen. We have to be realistic, and our housing problem will not be solved in the next 5 years. Hopefully we will make inroads into it, but it certainly will not be resolved. The housing of workers coming in there would put an awful lot of pressure on Denbighshire County Council. And looking at the definition of HMOs, registered HMOs, on our own website, if you look at our own website, the numbers there in Denbighshire are quite horrifying. And I believe the national average for HMOs in any county is 14% by the Welsh Government statistics, that the statistics that they put out is 14%. In Denbighshire, I believe we're bordering 37. And I think that shows quite clearly that we've got something very wrong somewhere. And to add to that by even 12, in my mind, is unreasonable. I haven't changed my mind on this at all. I do understand it's a balancing act that we shouldn't be asked to be making. It should be laid quite clearly at the health authority's door, and they should be making these decisions. We shouldn't be making the decisions. Knowing the situation, as Brian has said quite clearly, as the champion for the homeless, and has made out quite clearly that we have hotels throughout the county full of bed and breakfast, families living in single rooms in desperate need for housing. And there are 3 houses here, I beg your pardon, that are being changed into HMOs that will result in the same situation in the end, because we will have that responsibility at some stage to rehouse the incoming workers. It's an unsolvable problem that we as Denbighshire shouldn't be asked to make. It should be quite clearly the health authority should be making their own provision for their own needs. Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back.
Jumping out for that, thank you. And I'm just going to ask the other local member, Councillor Walker, apologies for getting the local member wrong before. Would you like to say anything on this, Jochen?
Yeah, I want to follow up from what Joan said. I'm totally backing Joan on this. We have a lot of issues here locally with people not having housing, and obviously overcrowded houses with families that need, to be accommodated. Yeah, as the county councillor, I know, speaking with residents, I can see there's going to be issues for myself and Wing going forward on this as well if this does get voted in. And I'm just saying that, I'm not against, obviously, us helping our local doctors and nurses. No, I think that's a fantastic thing to do, and we need to do that. But as for the Aberkinsey site, yeah, I do see some issues that will going forward. And yeah, I'm just backing Joan and Councillor Brian Blakely on this as well.
Okay, Jochen, I'm going to bring in Councillor Ellis now. Jochen, Councillor.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Mae hwn yn gynnig dyrys. Mae lot o'r cyfraniadau wedi bod yn ddiddorol iawn hyd yn hyn. Yr hyn dwi'n ei ystyried ydy, pe bai'r cais yma yn dod o'n blaenau ni, a bod y bobl sy'n mynd i fyw yn y tai ddim yn ddoctoriaid ac yn nyrsys, fydda'n addadl o gwbl amdan hyn, ta fysa ni gyd jyst yn cytuno'n sydd bod ni'n erbyn. A dwi ddim yn siŵr os ddylia gwaith y bobl sy'n byw yn y tai fod yn ystyriaeth, deud y gwir. Mi ddyla bod ni'n tynnu hynny allan. Wrth gwrs, mae rhaid i ni fedru cartrefu doctoriaid a nyrsys yn dod i fewn i'r wlad yma i weithio yn ysbytai ni. Ond, swn i'n ama hefyd, os dwi'n gwybod bod mae hyn tu allan i ystyried y cais yma, ond ydy o wir yn lle addas i fod yn cartrefu doctoriaid a nyrsys ifanc sy'n dod i fewn i'r wlad yma sydd ddim yn nabod y wlad, a maen nhw'n cael eu cartrefu mewn ardal bell o bob man, bell o lle maen nhw'n gweithio, ac o'n ffeindio ffordd i fewn i'r gwaith. Swn i'n meddwl bod hi'n llawer iawn fwy addas i ffendio cartrefi i'r bobl yma ar y safle lle maen nhw'n gweithio. A fel dwi'n dweud, dwi'n gwybod hynny tu allan i'r CAIS ond y beth pwysig i ni ydy, dwi'n meddwl y dylion ni fel pwyllgor fod yn tynnu'r gwaith y bobl sy'n byw allan o'n ystyriaeth ni'n fan hyn, a jyst yn meddwl, da ni isio cartrefi efo mwy na un teulu yn byw ynddyn nhw yn fan hyn, a dwi'n meddwl dylai bod ni'n tynnu'r ystyriaeth o beth i gwaith y bobl allan o'r cwestiwn yma. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, diolch yn fawr for that. I think the occupation is what's given it weight, but I'll ask the office to clarify that because it's clear we have a policy and we're moving away because of the need for the health board. I hear what you're saying, and I'll ask that point now while it's in our minds.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's certainly a consideration in this application. It's, you know, in essence, we are looking at what is known as a personal permission for the health board. They're allowed in planning. They're not common because generally, like you say, Councillor Ellis, you know, you have to differentiate and you have to take away personalities from it. But this is slightly more than the personality. This is actually an organisation that's asking for something to help it carry out its work. I think, you know, as I understand it, the accommodation that they used to have for the health board either no longer exists or no longer suitable. So, you know, maybe through their own mismanagement, dare I say it, they've put themselves in this problem. By refusing this, we're not actually helping anyone to solve that problem. And it's a very much an issue that we have to resolve now, and I think that's why we get a temporary permission and a personal permission. It is being recommended by officers for the basis that it actually gives them a chance to rethink. Now, maybe there's room there behind the scenes strategically, not through planning, for the council to be actually liaising with the health board and say, well, you know, you've got something for now, but we're going to see how it goes. We'll view it, but that's a strategic, that's a council move that goes outside the planning thing. I think that's another issue. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, no, thanks for that. I'm going to take one more, unless you, two more. I'll get this lady's next. Councillor Tomlin, please, Jochen.
Thank you. As a letting agent, I'm acutely aware of the housing crisis out there, both in the open market sector and on the housing list. I do, on Paul's point about whether or not allowing this to go through would mean that a family would come off the housing list. I don't think that's correct in that I think the local authority, it doesn't mean it won't come off. It definitely could come off the housing list in that the local authority are quite willing to help larger families take on property in the private rental sector. So it could very well help the housing list figures. I'm also aware that I do believe this property is empty. It's been empty now for a while. So insofar as being a retrospective application, is that actually the case, or is it a new application going forward in that it's not currently occupied and they're waiting for this to come about? It does worry me, as has been alluded to already, that we are being asked to address Betsy's failings in looking after their people coming into this country themselves over our needs in our own local authority and amongst our own residents. And I do struggle on this one, I must admit, but overall I think we are being asked to consider a material consideration that may outweigh adopted policy without actually having had any figures or statistics or a report from Betsy of how many of these people they do have, when they're coming, where from, not that that matters, how many they've got and how many are heading towards CLWYD, which is the only hospital to which they could be attached for these properties. So I think there's too many unknowns. I feel as though we're being asked to address somebody else's problem when we've got a bigger problem ourselves. Thank you.
Councillor Roberts, please.
Roberts. Is it me, or my take on this, I mean, maybe totally wrong, is that actually is the health board are trying to do everything above board, pardon the pun, is that could a private house owner not rent 4 rooms out in a house anyway? Because is that, do you need a license for that? I mean, just to check on that, because I'm just checking the policy, because you know you are allowed to rent a room out in a house, aren't you, without having to have a license. So I'm just, but what I'm trying to say is that, you know, effectively, we're talking about professionals being housed in a professional capacity, aren't we? And that's the weight I think this is given. I think it's a totally different debate if we're talking about just housing 5 people in a house, which we have no profession attached to it. Is my take right on that? That they're trying to be professional about this, and obviously if more than one room rented, you've got to get a license for it, etc. I'm just trying to understand it.
Okay, thanks for that. Confirmation
Thank you,
on
Chair.
that.
Yeah, a private household, you can rent some rooms out. It's a sliding scale. At what point is it a change of use? When if you rented 4 rooms out, you've got 4 independent there, that would probably trigger the concept that it's a HMO. That's the test of the C4. Similarly, you could find, you know, someone's got 6 bedrooms, but they only rent 2 out. They wouldn't need anything for that. What I would point back out is, on this particular application in front of us, is there is a fallback position for Cartrevi and for the health board. They don't need planning permission to rent it out to 3 nurses for each house. So that's the trigger point. You're talking the difference between 3 people across 3 houses. They could do that. We can't stop them. And what we end up doing there, you know, we've lost all control of it. We can at least revisit this situation down the line to see whether there's an impact. I think that's, you know, that's all I can say at this point. I totally understand everyone's concerns. You know, it's I understand it, but I think the right decision is as officers have recommended.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Hilders-Roberts. That's really good point on the trigger point. This doesn't sound like there's much in it. It's under licence as well. I do want to go to the vote now. I do know there's some hands up. Are you happy if I proceed? Yeah,
Chair, is it possible that I could move refusal on this, on the grounds of loss of accommodation, loss of housing to local residents, to our families? I said that are being made homeless at this moment in time. We're losing 3 properties here. Is it possible that I could move refusal on those grounds?
Brian, if you're okay, Councillor Blakely, I think if we vote with the proposal, we can vote for or against that, and that would be a cleaner way of doing it if it's okay.
Chair.
Are you okay with that?
If that is the recommendation of, yeah, by all means.
Yeah, just for clarity, we've already had a proposer, Councillor Gareth Sandlands, and a seconder, Councillor Winwell and James for grant.
Can I come in? I'm withdrawing my proposal. I've listened to the debate and I'm withdrawing my proposal as it stands at the moment. I've listened to the local debate that's going on, and unless there's I'm not happy that 5 years is an awful long time. We've gone through a pandemic. All right, we've accepted key workers have a great appreciation, but as Brian rightly says, and the other councillors that have just come in, there is a local consideration to the homeless and the growing waiting list that we have. I'm withdrawing my proposal at this moment in time. Thank you.
So that proposal has been withdrawn. Therefore, you've got Councillor Brian Blakely has moved a proposal that it be refused. You just need to understand if there's a seconder and clarification of reasons.
Okay. Can you clarify your reasons, Brian? Councillor Blakely, please.
Yes, I move refusal on grounds of loss of property for our local residents. 3 properties there. A loss of property. Again, we have so many homeless, so many, you know, of our residents with 3 or 4 children that cannot find housing, 4-bedroom housing, and it is a loss of local amenities for our local residents in Denbighshire.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that, please?
Am I allowed to second it?
You're not a member.
No, Councillor, you're not a member of the committee, but
Oh no, okay, then that's fine.
Councillor Andrea Tomlin has indicated that she's prepared to second that.
Mullen James, sorry I missed you before, Jockenbow.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. Firstly, that Councillor Butterfield said that this was substandard accommodation. I think that's far from true. This is exceptionally good accommodation for anyone to live in. And I'd like Paul, if he would, to confirm for me that this is not for the occupants to bring their families to. This is simply for them to have accommodation while they work in the area.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I would direct members to the suggested condition 3, which states that the HMO hereby approved shall be used solely for the purposes described in the application supporting documents and shall only be used to house 4 key workers. So I think that's quite clear that each of the units would only house 4 key workers. That's as I understand it, so you'd be correct, Councillor James.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to bring one more in and then go to the vote. Councillor Hildred Roberts, please, Jochen Vout.
Sorry, just for clarity again before the vote. When I was growing up, my mum was a nurse in Denby, and there was accommodation on site there, wasn't there, where nurses would come and live on site, and they'd go to work and come back. So just for my peace of mind, because I listened to the movement that Brian Blakely's made, which suggests is that by refusing this, the planning committee would be blocking families from having homes in this area. But what we're saying is these are already existing high-class houses that are empty, and that we're effectively turning them into sort of nurses' accommodation for work. That is what I'm hearing correctly, isn't it? Because I think that the debate is getting a bit stifled about the homeless issue in RHYL and not actually what's in front of us on the table. So I think, can I just have clarity on that? Because I want to make sure that we're voting on the right thing.
Okay, Giacomo. Officers?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Are members okay if I take this now to the vote? Okay, and just to clarify, we're voting on item 13, 14, 15. Is that correct, Gary? Giacomo. We'll call your names out now.
So the proposal is to refuse permission in respect of items 13, 14 and 15. So when I call your name, if you wish to refuse the application, you would vote for the proposal. And if you wish to grant permission, then you would vote against the proposal. Is everybody clear with that? Yeah. So Councillor Brian Blakely.
Yeah, I go for on the loss of amenities for our local residents.
Councillor Karen Edwards. Yes. Cynghorydd Gwyneth Ellis.
O blaid.
Councillor James Elson. Councillor John Harland.
Against.
Cynghorydd Hildred Roberts.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Alan James.
Against.
Cynghorydd Gareth Jones.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Terry Mendes. Councillor Wynne James.
Against.
Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Peter Prendergast.
Against.
Councillor Gareth Sandilands.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Scott.
Against.
Councillor Andrea Tomlin.
For.
Councillor Mark Young.
Against.
So in respect of the motion to refuse permission, 11 members voted against that, 3 members voted for it, and there were 2 abstentions, so that's defeated.
The application has been approved.
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you for that, members. I'll go to the last item, which is additional items. Item number 16, page 233. And there's no code for this, and this is land to the northwest of east of Mindale Farm, Fwrdd Hendra off Fwrdd Tŷ Newydd, Melodyn, and Prestatyn, and land north of Melodyn Road and west of Fwrdd Tŷ Newydd, Melodyn, Prestatyn. And I'll hand over to officers who are going to give us an update on this item. Jochen Bout.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, it's just an information report. We don't need to make any decisions on this now. Obviously, we're happy to answer questions, but I think the report's probably self-explanatory. It's just to update you on the outcome of the recent planning appeal at what's commonly known as Mindale Farm. It was an application that was presented to Planning Committee probably 2 years ago now, I think. Was held up in abeyance by the planning inspectorate for quite a while due to the pandemic. They finally had the inquiry at the end of last year, and the application, the appeal was dismissed. So basically the council won its case. It's worth reading because I think this site is still an allocated site. We've had some discussions with members recently. It's very much up to the developers at the moment whether they pursue another application. I think that the inspector's decision does give a few sort of clues as to what they may need to do to secure a permission on that site, but we can only wait and see at this point. Of note, and I think probably what's most useful for the new members here, is that although we won both appeals, i.e. they were dismissed, we still had a cost claim against us. That was awarded. Basically, the council chose to refuse the main application for 2 reasons. One of those was highway grounds. The trouble being that the highway grounds had already been explored at a previous appeal and had been considered to be acceptable. So therefore, when we refused it again on highway grounds, the inspector ruled that we'd actually acted unreasonably at that point. And when you act unreasonably, we've actually caused unnecessary cost and expense to the appellants, and we're liable to pay that cost now. So although you can win an appeal, if you don't get your reasons for refusal right, you can still end up paying the costs of the appellant. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Okay, Jochen Bout, and then got a few hands up. Councillor Parry, please, Jochen Bout.
Thank you, Chair. Can Paul just explain or remind the members of the Planning Committee now, when the application originally came in, I think it was offers a recommendation to grant this application, and the Planning Committee went against the officers in refusal and took it to, and then it obviously went to appeal, and it was lost in appeal with a cost to Denbighshire. So I'd just like maybe just to clarify that it was the Planning Committee that took that against officers' recommendation, which is where it landed in appeal, and the cost landed with Denbighshire on that ground. Just thought I'd clarify that for the new member.
Thank you for that, Councillor Parry. Absolutely right, and that's how good the last Planning Committee were.
Jochen Bout.
I've not much to add really, other than you're absolutely right. And I'm glad I wasn't the case officer on that. Thank you.
And I've got a hand up. Councillor Sunderland, please.
Yeah, thank you. I made a request yesterday, and I think I want to make a formal request today that as soon as we know the costs, it is told to the entire committee and the reasoning behind the costs. Thank you. And lessons learned, if there are to be any lessons learned towards the costs, and refuting the costs in future for that should it happen. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Anyone else? Are we happy with that? Okay. Okay. I'm going to thank you all and close today's planning committee meeting. Jochen Bout, thank you very much.